Welcome back to the channel, Control Freaks. Today we are taking a look at a blue-black Days Undoing deck. This is going to be a nice little deck tech and an introduction to the deck. I did play this today on stream over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/LessAlex. Unfortunately, I am a jabroni and I left my music on, so I cannot upload that video for you to watch on YouTube. If you want, go on over there, watch it. It is a VOD on that side of things. But let's get into this one. I don't want to waste any of your time. This deck is super dope, and if you like playing blue-based control decks in Pioneer, this is one you definitely want to check out. We've got to start with our 3 mana value spells first. As you can tell, we've got Narst Parter of Veils. This entire deck rotates and is all built around Narst Parter of Veils and Days Undoing. You probably know what Narst does, so let's start with Days Undoing. Days Undoing is a time twister effect, meaning that you get to discard your hand and draw 7 new cards. Let's read what it does exactly. It's 2 mana, 3 mana total, 2 colorless and a blue sorcery. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. Then, if it is your turn, you have to end your turn. Obviously, that is a huge downside because that means you can't get to cast any of the cards that you refilled with. However, when you have Narst Parter of Veils on the battlefield, her passive ability means they get to only draw 1 card. Okay? So, on turn 4, as early as turn 4 in this deck, you can cast Narst on 3, cast Days Undoing on 4, and you can essentially just win the game on the spot. They discard their entire hand, they draw 1 card, you get to refill 7 brand new cards, and then their entire game plan is just shattered. So this is a very powerful 1-2 punch if you can do it. And it doesn't have, you don't have to do it on turn 4, but obviously the earlier the better. Let's take a look at the rest of the cards in this deck, and we will go through the deck tech here. Starting off in our 1 spot, we've got Consider. Now, I know a lot of blue control decks in Pioneer have moved away from cards like this because, well, Censor is pretty decent and in playing that early card draw, but Consider is in here because we want to just get through our deck as fast as possible to try and find Narst and Days Undoing as quick as possible. That's why Consider is in here. It surveils, which helps us with our dig through time that's hiding right there. But we're playing 4 Considers here. Next up, we've got Orions Vortex. This is an instant, and it costs 1 blue. It has kicker of 2 and a black. Return target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand. If this spell was kicked, put that permanent on the bottom of its owner's library instead. So this has really great synergy with Days Undoing, because what you can do is you can bounce a creature or a planeswalker to their hand, and then you can Days Undoing it, and it gets shuffled away. Now, that combo works whether you have or don't have Narst on the battlefield. Of course, if you have Narst on the battlefield, this is just like a 1-mana hero's downfall, essentially. Insane. Moving on, we've got Cling to Dust. Cling to Dust is a excellent card. It's exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, you gain 3 life. Otherwise, you draw a card. It's got Escape for 4. Exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. This card is excellent. It sees play in most Dimir and Esper versions of Control in the format. It is always a one of. Super, super good. Early card draw. Helps interact against Greasefang and other decks that want to use the graveyard. Very good card. Moving on, we've got Fatal Push. Of course, this card, just the best 1-mana black removal spell in the format. We're playing 4 of them. Moving on to the 2-drops now, the 2-mana spells. We've got 4 Censors. This is pretty stock at this point. You play some number of Censor in your 75. And this time we're playing all 4 because it does cycle. It helps us find our Days Undoing and our Narst sets. Moving on, we've got 2 negates. Of course, we can't play Dovin's Veto with the blue-black lands, so we're playing negate instead. Still very good, very powerful. Next up, we've got Go for the Throat. Go for the Throat is awesome because you get to play it against, well, anything that's not an artifact, but specifically the card we're looking out for is Shieldred. Shieldred is obviously very, very powerful against us because our whole thing is we want to draw 7 cards and we don't want to lose a million life. So Go for the Throat obviously kills a plethora of creatures, but specifically Shieldred is what we're looking for. 3 drops, we talked about them. Those are the meat and potatoes. We are playing only 3 Days Undoing, so whenever you are going through and playing, you do need to realize that because, well, we want 4 Narset because it does a lot more than just wheel, and it's just generally just a good card. So that's why there's a split of 3-4 on those. Moving on to the 4 mana cards, we've got Memory Deluge, the best 4 mana, quote-unquote, draw 2 in the format. You get to look at the top 4, and then when it flashes back, you get to look at the top 7. That's just dig through time. So this card's very good. Moving on, we've got Baleful Mastery. You might not be as familiar with this one. Baleful Mastery is a 4 mana instant. You may pay 2 rather than pay its mana cost. If the 2 was paid, the opponent gets a draw card, and what it does is it exiles target creature or planeswalker. Now, this obviously synergizes very well with Narset. On their turn, after they've drawn their card, you get to just pay 2, and you don't get the downside of them drawing a card because it can't, because Narset says they can't. Card's very good. Next up, we've got 3 Ritual of Soots. Ritual of Soot is just a wrath for all creatures, mana value 3 or less. This is great against humans, any little to the ground decks. This card's excellent. Moving on, the final 4-drop is Ertai Resurrected. This is a Dimir 4 mana card with 3/2. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose up to 1. Counter target spell or activated ability or triggered ability. Its controller draws a card, or destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller draws a card. Great synergy, again, with Narset, because if you do this on their turn, they don't get to draw that card. They don't get to draw that card. Ertai, overperforming, honestly. Overperforming in my games. Next up, we've got Shark Typhoon. When you resolve this, well, we already know what happens. You win the game, but you get to resolve this against Rakdos quite a bit, actually, and they really don't have any ways to deal with it game 1. And oftentimes they don't have any ways to deal with it game 2, and you get to grind with them and just win the game. And then, of course, Dig Through Time. This card's great. It works with our Considers and our Censors because we're getting through those quite quickly. And, yeah, this card's excellent. Dig Through Time is tried and true. Moving on to the sideboard. Let's talk about the sideboard just a little bit here. We've got 2 Cut Down. This is for any deck that has little creatures. So think mono white humans, or I know mono red's still floating around, and actually mono red performed pretty well in, I think, the last Pioneer Challenge. I think it top 16, so definitely be on the lookout for mono red a little bit more than you've probably seen in prior weeks. Next up, we've got Ether Gust. Of course, this is good against mono green Devotion. This is good against boats. This is good against any green or red deck, obviously. I mean, this is a very easy card to tell why it's in here. Disdainful Stroke, on the other hand, we have this against control because a lot of their power hitters are things like Emperor, Teferi. They have Memory Deluge. These cards, obviously, full to Disdainful Stroke. Additionally, you want to have Disdainful Stroke against mono green because a lot of their things do cost 4 or more. So a lot of their payoffs do, at least. And you can bring this in against Lotus for their ultimatums and things of that nature. Next up, we've got more counter magic. We've got 3 Mystical Disputes. Mystical Disputes you bring in basically against any blue deck. So Spirits, Control, Lotus. You always bring it in against Lotus. And, in my opinion, you bring it in against mono green Devotion because it hits your 3 mana. Yeah, you're not going to get to cast this for 1 mana against them, obviously, but The 3 mana can count all of their big spells. Now, obviously, this does lose a little bit of its juice later on in the game, but if you time these properly and you draw them early enough in the game, Mystical Dispute is very, very good against mono green. Next up, we've got Graveyard Trespasser, and this comes in against, I bring it in against control. I also bring this in against Greasefang. Obviously, this card's nutty against Greasefang, being able to exile a card every single time you attack, and when it enters the battlefield, it's very, very good. And you can bring this in against mono white or any deck that has smaller creatures that you just want to gum up the board. Next up, we've got Extinction Event. This comes in against any creature-based deck. So you can bring this in against mono white, bring this in against mono red. You don't have to bring it in against mono red, but if they're like the Goblins build, I think that's probably correct. But of course, you get to choose even or odd. Exile each creature with mana value of the chosen quality. Very, very interesting wording there, but very good card. Very good card. Next up, we've got Colitis Trader of Get, an oldie but a goodie. This is a 4 mana, 3/4 with a lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die instead, exile it and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, and then you can pay 3, sacrifice a zombie token, and you get to put +1/+1 counters on Colitis. So this card is good against control because it is a beater. You do need to pressure them. You need to be able to pressure any planeswalkers that slip through the cracks. Additionally, you can bring this in against, obviously, mono white, any low-to-the-ground creature decks. And I also like bringing it in against sometimes mono green, but I don't know. Not always, not always. It depends the context of what's really in their deck. And talking about the lands, we've got some really spicy ones. We got Geyer Reach, Sanitarium. This combos with Narset. If you get them Hellbent, then this card's just nuts. So it adds for colorless, but it also tap it. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. So if you have Narset in play, what you can do is you can activate this during their upkeep before they draw. They draw, and then they discard, and then they don't get a draw step because Narset says each opponent can't draw more than 1 card. So they don't even get to draw for their draw step. And if you get them Hellbent at all and get to activate this, they just never get to draw a card the rest of the game, basically. Now, obviously, if they draw an instant, I had a situation where they drew a Baleful Mastery, my opponent did, and they killed my Narset. That was super unlucky, but still, this card can potentially have a soft lock on your opponent when they get Hellbent, which means they don't have any cards in their hand, if you didn't know that. So we got 2 of those. We've got 2 Hall of Storm Giants. This card is primarily your win condition. A lot of the times, this will be how you actually finish the game. It is a creature land. It adds for blue, and then you can tap 6 mana, and it turns into a blue 7/7 with Ward 3. So it finishes games quite quickly. And then our last ability land, our last utility land, is Takenuma, Abandoned Mire. Of course, this is a channel land for 4 mana. You can discard it, mill 3 cards, and then you get to return a creature, or more importantly, a planeswalker to your hand. So in step, if your Narset was slain previously, you can go ahead and channel this, return Narset to your hand, play Narset, wheel and deal, baby. Easy game, easy life. That is Narst Days Undoing. This deck is so sick. I'm going to have a video up sooner than later, but like I said, I'm a jabroni, and I had my music playing on the VOD, so I wasn't able to upload it, but I will, I promise, get another gameplay up. If you guys did make it to the end of this video, leave down in the comments, Narset rocks, in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like it. Of course, subscribe. I'm coming out with as much as I can content. If that's daily, it's daily. We're coming out with at least 5 videos every single week, whether it's gameplay, top 5 videos, or deck techs like this. If there's any kind of other kind of videos you'd like me to make, let me know in the comments section. You can hit me up on Twitter @LessAlex. Join the Discord down below. It'll be linked. If you want to watch me stream, head on over to twitch.tv/LessAlex. I stream over there weekdays at 9 a.m. Central. This deck is sick. I really, really enjoy it. I'm a huge Control fan. Oh, and if you want to hit up the podcast, The Control Freak, hit it up. It's on all the podcast platforms. And, of course, I have a podcast Eyes edition on the YouTube. So thanks, everybody, for watching. I hope you did enjoy. And until next time, keep spreading that Dimir propaganda. Have a good one, Control Freaks. Adios.